All right, I think we're ready to go back into action. Thank you for those very, very good questions during the first part. And here's a chance. Wow, look at what we got up on the stage. If you guys can't ask these guys some really good questions, we ought to pack it up. We're going to have each of the lawmakers introduce themselves and tell us where they're from. Representative Olson, we'll start with you, sir, and work those microphones very close, guys, please.
Okay, I'm Rick Olson from District 55, which starts south of Ann Arbor, follow 23 down to Ohio, take a left to Lake Erie.
All right, very good. Representative?
I'm David. Try this. I'm David Rutledge. I represent the 54th district. I think of it as you leave Wayne County and that whole tier as you enter Washtenaw County, from Salem Township to the north, Superior Township, City of Ypsilanti Township, down to Augusta.
Very good. Representative, nice to have you with us.
I'm Representative Jeff Irwin, and I represent the City of Ann Arbor.
I'm Mark Wimett, and I represent 52nd District, which is the northern part of the City of Ann Arbor, and then it would be Dexter, Chelsea, Manchester, Saline, and Whitmore Lake.
Very good. Representative. Senator?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Senator Rebecca Warren. My district is the bulk of Washtenaw County, except for the sliver that I share with Senator Richardville here, Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, Dexter, Chelsea, Whitmore Lake.
And Senator.
Thank you. I'm Senator Randy Richardville. I represent all of Monroe County, 4 municipalities in Jackson County, and 8 here in Washtenaw County.
Okay, could I have somebody turn the volume up? This is a good one. I'm helping lawmakers. This is not in my role definition.
And could somebody turn his down?
Yeah. That would be Richardville 1, Squebec nothing, all right? Okay, that sounds good. We'll get you a little more juice here. All right, let's start off with a question with a show of hands. Okay, show of hands. We'll start with the easy stuff. Raise your hand if you believe the state is spending too much on the prison system. Mr. Richardville, a reluctant raising of the hand, sir. And work this microphone close because this will be held against you in a court of law. Go ahead.
Very good. Yeah, I'm sure we pay more for corrections than what we would like to. It'd be nice if we didn't have anybody there. So I'm hesitating a little bit about how much we pay and whether we can get those same services for a lower cost. Most of the Midwest, actually on a per year basis, pays less to house their prisoners than Michigan does. So in general, yeah, we should take a look at reducing those costs.
All right, follow-up question, again, show of hands. How many people on the panel believe we are not spending enough money on education? Mr. Olson, goodness gracious, explain.
Well, I've been a school business manager for 7 years, and my wife's a school superintendent, and there are some things that we can do yet to control costs that we have not yet done. And there's only 2 studies that have been done that I've seen anyway in my course in my PhD program in education administration dealing with economics of education. There's only 2 studies that have been done that shows that more money results in better results. And that's in preschool, basically the high school program that was study in Ypsilanti, and class size in kindergarten through 2. Other than that, it's all anecdotal. And so my focus is how do we control costs first in our broken system and before we just throw more money into it. With 80 to 85% or more of all funds in education going to salaries and benefits, my fear is with our system, if we just pour money into it, all we'll see is higher salaries and benefits and no benefit to the students. Representative
Rutledge, please.
I would just like to mention something that's not anecdotal. Because we have decreased funding to education in this state at a faster rate than the overall budget, state budget, has decreased, we are losing out on 4 million, let me get the number here, on $4 million from the feds per year. Now, let me tell you why that's significant to me, because it affects a program in my district, specifically at EMU, Eastern Michigan University. This program is called the College Positive Communities Grant. And within the University of Eastern, those grant dollars that we're now going to be missing out on were used specifically directed to help low-income college students coming in.
But your colleague sitting next to you just said that there is still fat in the system. Do you agree with that, sir?
I don't think there's any university, anybody here from the university community or K-12 that would say that there's much fat left.
He just did.
Well, then I would think he'd have to defend where that is. We haven't found it, and the people who are discussing this issue with me have not found it. We're busy trying to collapse and consolidate K-12 schools because of funding deficits. And I'll give you one other specific example. In the case of Wooler Run schools, they have cut to the point that there's nothing, really nothing else left. But the ironic part is that each year, at least last year and projected this year, they will have a budget surplus. That budget surplus is not able to take care of the existing deficit because of additional cuts that keep happening along the way.
Let me check with the rest of the panelists, and then Mr. Olson, I'll come back to you. Representative Irwin?
Well, I think that there's an opportunity for both of my colleagues to my right to be a little bit right. In any large system, we're spending $13 to $14 billion on K-12 and a couple billion on higher ed. Any big system, there's always going to be opportunities to find efficiencies and save some dollars. But I think that where that argument falters is that the magnitude of those opportunities pales in comparison to the magnitude of cuts that are coming down from Lansing for our school districts. And when many of you invested in this community and when many of you bought homes in this community or started businesses in this community, part of that investment was all wrapped up in the property values here. It's all wrapped up in the quality of our schools, and it's all wrapped up in the University of Michigan. So I really think that our community is a community that thrives on education and innovation, and the state would do well, and certainly Washtenaw County would do well to invest more rather than less in education.
So that $1 billion cut that the K-12 budget took, that turned your stomach?
That did turn my stomach because we deserve better. That is not the kind of community that certainly I invested in. I want a community with great schools, and once again, I think Washtenaw County thrives on that. But the point I'm trying to make is that the opportunities for efficiencies pale in comparison to the size of the cuts. So the fat that we're cutting isn't extra administrators or wasted money. The fat we're cutting is arts and music and athletics and larger class sizes. I was just in a class on Monday. There was 34 kids in the class. That's quite a few. And Mr. Olson made the point that we've got 80% of the costs wrapped up in labor. Well, of course we do. That's true of the foster care system. That's true of child protective services. That's true of corrections. That's true of almost everything the state government does because the service that we're providing is provided by people. I suspect that many of your businesses have business models where 80% of your cost is wrapped up in your employees, depending on what you're doing. Obviously not if you're manufacturing something, but if you're a consulting service, if your business is people, you're going to spend your money on people. So that makes perfect sense to me.
Representative Wilmette, you voted for that $1 billion cut.
Yes, I did.
Proudly?
Well, I think and Jeff is on a point here that I think it's important. It's whether we and how we go about funding this, we're going to have to do things differently, both in terms of the schools, how they look at educating kids, how they look at how education is delivered. So whether there's waste in a system or not, it's, I think, a more better time focused in on how that education is delivered.
Well, do you believe that $1 billion cut helped to improve the educational level in this state?
I think what it did do is at a point where we needed to stabilize an overall budget. And the overall budget had not been truly balanced in quite some time. And this was a top priority of government, is to balance that budget, money in, money out. And when you do that and you approach it that way, it gets painful, and there isn't anybody in this room that didn't escape what that pain really was. But I think the issue now is, where do we go from here and how do we move forward?
So you will concede that that billion-dollar cut did not help the quality of education?
Yeah, I don't think it improved education.
All right. Senator?
Well, Tim, I've known you long enough to know you don't ask many questions without some forethought, so I don't think it's a coincidence that you asked the question about corrections followed by the question about education. And to me, these are two incredibly large line items in our budget. We're spending now a full 25% of our general fund, general purpose dollars on corrections. And what we do know from those studies that are done here in our backyard at High Scope are that the dollars that we invest early, those pre-K dollars, early childhood education dollars, have a direct impact on how much we have to spend in juvenile justice and corrections costs down the road. So I'd like to see more of those dollars focusing on early childhood education so we can spend less on prisons, because we spend right now about $7,300 per pupil as the sort of floor for our K-12 funding. But in our prison system, it could be $30,000 to $50,000 a person depending on what facility they're in. I'd rather spend it on the front end where it's cheaper and we get better results for everybody.
But isn't that easy to say, but in reality, what is the alternative? You want to let people out of prison?
Absolutely. I think there are a lot of people. I think there's a lot of the work that we've done. I've had the opportunity to sit on the Judiciary Committee for 4 years while I served in the House, and what we know, and Senator Richardville alluded to this, what we know from looking at the Midwest states as an average, we put people in Michigan in jail and in our prison system for longer sentences for crimes that other states that are in our backyard do not sentence people to prison time for at all. And we keep people, instead of doing a truth in sentencing means you're going to serve 85 or 90% of your sentence, in Michigan truth in sentencing means you're going to serve 120% of your sentence before you're ever considered for parole. So I think there's still a lot of ways that we can get folks out of the corrections system, that we can do that by diverting them in the first place using, we've had tons of success here in this community with drug courts and substance abuse courts, mental health courts, getting people that shouldn't be in the correction system diverted before they ever enter our prison doors.
Senator Richardville, you agree?
With everything? Parts of it.
Let me rephrase the question.
No,
should we be letting? No. You like this one, okay?
All right.
Should we be letting more crooks out of prison?
Well, no, not the crooks. We should just let the ones that were innocent out. The original question was about education, and most of us that are involved in our communities, whether it's a school board or whether it's being a parent or whatever, we usually think about our schools for the most part. What we up here at this panel don't have that luxury. Let me tell you a couple things about schools right here in this room. There is a great disparity as to how much money you get per student if you live in Milan versus if you live in Ann Arbor schools. And if you live in Detroit, you've got different issues than you do in Grand Rapids. One of the difficulties with the question is just painting it broad brush. This panel, by the way, in Washtenaw County, your representatives, is probably the most active with regard to early childhood education. Everybody up here in one way or another has been involved in that in his or her career before they got in the legislature and during. Part of the problem we have is not just the K-12, not just what's going on within our classrooms, but it's what's going on within our family structures. Our teachers are asked to be babysitters, they're asked to be counselors, they're asked to be psychologists, and they are accepting children at the age of 4, 5, 6 years old, and they have significant issues before they start school. One of the things I've talked about with chambers of commerce is you have to understand beyond just the education piece or the kind of questions we normally get, this is a workforce development question for your business community. 10, 15, 20 years from now, these elementary school kids are the ones that you're either going to have to be re-educating or you're going to welcome in the workforce and they're ready to work at that point and they have a great education. I challenge Michigan and this group in general to be more involved as a business community in the education of the younger folks that are in this state.
Representative Olson, let me come back to you now because they've asked you for a BMI account of the schools, please.
Before we do that, I want to come back to the education.